It's Mike and Mitzi, and this is Wave Social Podcast powered by Arcade Studios, a show for marketers, creators, and brand builders who want to make waves online.
We sit down with experts and tastemakers behind today's up-and-coming brands, and today in the show we have Mark Bone and Michael Del Monte.
That was fantastic.
Thank you. I had to practice the sequence of those words a few times.
Yeah, so here we are. We got Mark and Michael.
Yes.
And this is Mark's second time on the show.
This is the first time we're getting someone back on the show after they've already been on the show. But we'll have more recurring guests soon.
Yeah, we got more coming up because a lot of guests on Wave Social Podcast just have a lot going on, a lot to talk about, a lot of value to give. So Mark came back, he brought it back, and he brought a guest, Michael Del Monte.
Yeah. So Michael Del Monte is a Canadian documentary filmmaker. He has a really interesting background. He has a degree in philosophy. Yeah.
Smart man.
And then Mark Bone is also a filmmaker. He's an award-winning documentary director, both based out of Ontario, Canada.
Yeah, they're both pretty decorated guys. They've got quite a few accomplishments. I know Michael Del Monte, he's had documentaries acquired by the likes of Netflix, Amazon Prime, ESPN, Sundance, Vice. The list goes on.
I know. It's very impressive.
And then Mark, he's won a lot of awards as well. Vimeo Best of the Month and Staff Pick premieres. He's also directed many documentaries and documentary-style commercial campaigns for global brands like Mercedes-Benz, Nike, BMW, and Nikon.
Yeah, and what I loved talking to them about was their course, which Mark Bone actually has created a YouTube channel, which has gotten so many subscribers and followers, and he's built a really strong community there. And he decided to team up with Michael, and they created this course called The Art of Documentary, which has gone on to also produce some amazing filmmakers. And so we talk about how they've created that community, how they were able to leverage YouTube. And I think that will give us a lot of great insight if you're interested in doing more on YouTube.
Yeah, I think it's good for people in the film industry, but it's also good for just any creator or expert in something that wants to create a course.
Yeah, and it inspired us to get on YouTube too.
It did. Yeah, here we are on YouTube, the Wild Wild West.
You might be watching this on YouTube.
Odds are you're not, but if you're listening somewhere else or watching somewhere else, then maybe next time try it on YouTube.
I mean, maybe we you don't all have to rush to YouTube because we're still figuring it out.
We're iterating. So yeah, you can catch episodes and clips on YouTube, and if you really want to see the evolution of a creative process, then tune in now YouTube. And just watch it over the next 6 months.
Yes.
We're on our come up. Showing up and glowing up.
Let's talk about our merch.
Okay.
This is merch.
For all the people watching on YouTube, you can see this product.
You can also see it by going to wavesocialpodcast.com/merch if you'd like to get it.
You can't see it. You can probably hear me touching it.
Some ASMR.
ASMR. Yeah, exactly. Mitzi, do you want to put it on?
I guess.
My head's too big for it.
I'm not really a hat girl, but
I mean, you should be looking at you right now.
For this hat. I actually think it might not be the best shape for me, but it's a great shape for most people who wear hats.
And more importantly, it's a great color.
It's a great color, and there's a great tagline on it. Do you want to read it for the people?
It says placeholder.
Why did we do placeholder?
I mean, this was more so your decision, but I think it's just a great kind of play on marketing speak and placeholder text, and even just like that good old quality assurance process that you need to have in your marketing flow to make sure that that placeholder text doesn't live on the final product.
Right. We thought it would be fun to have placeholder on the final product as and hopefully designers out there or marketers are like, oh my gosh, is that meant to be there? So that's what inspired us to do it.
Yeah. First hat, probably not the last.
Yeah, it is a really nice material. I'll say that. Even though I'm not really a hat girl, I do like the material of this one. It almost feels like it's weather resistant.
Yeah, it does. Kind of almost like a Gore-Tex kind of vibe.
Yeah. So check it out, wavesocialpodcast.com/merch if you want to get your hat. We may or may not be restocking these, so get it now while you can.
And grab a candle while you're at it.
Yes, our candles are great. They're flying like hot cakes.
Recently, someone told me it was the best candle they ever smelled.
Do you hear that? We should write that down. Get them to write it down.
I know.
Anyways, enjoy this episode. It's a good one. I wasn't going to say that.
Mitzi literally was like, let's not say this was a good one.
It is a good one, though. I know. feel like I do say that every time, but it really is a good one.
Okay, well, let's move on from the intro and bring in Michael and Mark.
Enjoy.
Okay, Mark and Mike, we're excited to have you guys on the show. This is our second ever video interview, so welcome
Wow.
to Life in Video. You
There
guys are
you
the
go.
pros, though.
I'm used to it. Yeah,
We-
we're used to filmmaking, so this is cool seeing you guys doing it as well.
yeah, and you're usually behind the camera, but then you also got the YouTube channel too, so you're pros at both sides.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call this filmmaking by any
You know,
stretch of
Speak
the
for yourself.
imagination.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, neither is TikTok, but seems to be doing well.
Fair enough. So we've had Mark on the show before. Welcome back, Mark. Can you give our listeners a refresher on who you are and how you got into the film industry?
Yeah, my name is Mark. Obviously, I'm from Toronto, Canada. I'm a documentary director. I kind of stumbled into the YouTube world a couple years ago, and that's opened up a lot of cool new avenues for filmmaking and collaborating. And I first got into filmmaking about 15 years ago, doing some humanitarian work overseas, and discovered that I kind of wanted to tell stories that seemed to be less Hollywood, perhaps, is one way to call it. But I guess in a way they do become that in their own way. But yeah, I like stories of kind of unknown people, and that's how I stumbled into documentary filmmaking.
Love it. And then, Mike, this is your first appearance on our show. We're pumped you could join us. And we'd love for you to just give our audience some context to who you are and what you do and why you hang around Mark.
Well, I hang around Mark because he is a really nice guy,
I would say it's the other way
and
around. I hang with Mike.
um, yeah, it's a mutual hanging, I think. I got into filmmaking a little more accidentally. It was I'd done all my schooling and undergrad and masters and wasn't planning on it, but I was actually a runner. I was trying to make the Olympics as a runner, and I was down at training camp in 2012, and I was injured. And one of my teammates had a DSLR camera, and I didn't really know how to use it, but just kind of put it on auto and started making these little portraits of the athletes down there because I wasn't able to run. And a running website picked them up called Flow Track. It's like kind of the mainstream running popular website, and asked if I could do a few more. So people back home in Toronto area started seeing them and asked if I'd do a little video on their race. And I had this huge background of writing these very long, lengthy essays that no one would ever read. And so it just kind of sparked that maybe I could explore some of these ideas I was interested in through a different medium. And it was way more fun, way more engaging. Yeah, I don't really miss the papers much at all. And yeah, that was 10 years ago. So
Crazy. So
yeah.
fast forward now as like a bit more of an established filmmaker, how do you think your academic background has impacted your career or the way you
Mhm.
view stories now as a filmmaker?
The few things I'd say would be the ability to go very deep with one idea. I remember doing a seminar course on the ontological argument for the existence of God, and the whole course was on one line, and you'd have to write a 50-page essay on one line of a text.
Hmm.
And I look back being like, man, that was tedious and that was exhaustive. But that's what I do now. It's like I meet a character and they've got one goal. They're on a quest, or they've got something that's troubling them inside and they're trying to resolve it. And I take a year or 2 years to explore that thing, that whatever it is for that person. And so it's very similar in that way, just to be able to spend a lot of time in one place and just let the roots go very deep. Yeah, it was honestly, I feel like kind of the perfect prerequisite for what I do, kind of the people I document and explore. So that's definitely the biggest thing, the patience to kind of do these things that aren't done, super quick, but it's a
Mhm.
long cooking process.
Yeah, and I find it so fascinating when someone invests so much time into one career path and then pivots into something totally different. Was there like
Mm.
a struggle or tension in that and like accepting that maybe you weren't going to go
Hmm.
down this academic route once you
Yeah, big
discovered
time.
filmmaking?
Big time. You know, and more so the running. Like the bigger thing was I was getting paid to be a runner, very small amount because it was an amateur sport, but I was getting money from the government. And my path was sort of, you know, I finished my master's. I was beginning a PhD, maybe be a professor, a running coach. Like I had this idea, and I always feel like I traded the one passion for another passion because film was a passion of mine when I was a kid. I just never imagined you could make money off of it. I never imagined you could ever get to the pearly gates of Hollywood. Like it was just so elusive. Like the whole notion, like it was impossible. It was just like you'll never get there. And so, but honestly, what it was getting my first like $500 gig. And this was back in 2012, and I had to drive from Guelph to London, Ontario, 3 times to cover this track race. This, you know, it's like this arduous process to make, and it was a ridiculous amount of editing. But when I got the $500 check, I was just like, huh, people will pay you to do this. And then that really sparked something for me. And the documentaries came very shortly after, but that at least changed my perspective just to think like maybe I can make a little bit of income doing something. Like no one was going to pay me to write an essay. You're just going to
Mm.
have to get grants and scholarships and all that. And that, you know, so it was the first time in my life, I think, where I had a bit of a business pers- mindset of it, if that makes sense. Like just, huh, I could do both my passion and make some money. Well, that's awesome. So,
That is awesome.
that was, I still can't believe it, you know, 10 years later and you have a family and you're providing for them doing this. It's wild. I know Mark and I both like it. Yeah, you're so blessed, so fortunate. So,
Yeah, so you mentioned you got that first $500 check, and then shortly after that started documentaries. So what was the jumping off point into documentaries from that first paid gig?
I read a book. It was a, you know, it was the typical, Mark would probably even know what it is, like a screenwriting book that Sid Fried, who's the famous screenwriter. I can't remember his name. It's the book. Everyone who wants to make a screenplay goes to chapters, and you get this book.
I
Right.
thought it was always Save the Cat. That's what everyone
Oh,
gets.
I don't know. This was some screenwriting thing, and I remember like in the first chapter he said, if this is your first screenplay, write about what you know. And for me, that was running. Like I had done 10 years of a competitive running, and so, and my first paid gigs were in the running world. And so it was just, and at that paid gig, in fact, was when I met my first documentary subject. I was at this race and I saw this guy, Wesley Career. He had just won the Boston Marathon a couple weeks ago. He was there cheering his wife on, who I went to high school with. She was a Canadian. She went on a scholarship to the States where she met him. They fell in love, got married. He was there watching her race. I saw him go into the bathroom and I followed him in and just said like we were going pee and TMI. I just said, "Hey man, I know who you are. I know who Tara is. Congratulations on the marathon. I I uh, I have this idea of doing a doc about this connection between long distance runners all having some faith in some higher power, and that's how they are able to, you know, the idea was like sprinters pound their chest when they finish and long distance runners put their hands up to the sky. And so he connected with that. And that was, he was like, come out, we'll shoot a little video. And I used that little video to go get some money from a investor. Mark ended up coming onto that project eventually, but that was really the start. It was kind of that world I knew, started with my first paid gig and then turned into my first feature documentary. So yeah, it was all kind of in the same world.
And Mike actually cornered me in a bathroom as well to pitch me the film.
That was over a phone, you
Yeah.
know? It
Love
was
it.
funny though, I'll say it real quick, like, I was just in Brooklyn and, doing Queens, actually, not I was in Queens, and, a couple people, you know, they see you have a camera there, and they're like, "Oh, you got a camera. What, like, how do you get into it? How do you," and it's still my number one advice for young people, and Mark, you know, he had the same experiences, like, just you gotta find your niche.
Mhm.
Like, you gotta find that place that you know really well, that you have more connections than anywhere else, and honestly, like, that can take you that could really springboard your entire career if you know, people always wanna go wide too fast, but
Yeah.
narrow and deep, you know?
Yeah, we talk
Yeah.
about that a lot on the show, actually.
Mhm.
Even last week in our conversation, it's I don't know why it's counterintuitive to be niche, like to have a really narrow focus, but I think it's maybe just fear based, you know, like wanting to appeal to as many people as possible, but then it
Mhm.
just never pans out the way you want it to.
It's
Yeah.
I think it's that typecast thing, like people often think like, "Oh, I just don't wanna be the running guy," or "I don't wanna just do the sports guy," and it's like, I remember people telling me that, and because my first few films were all in that world, and then eventually they weren't though, and
Yeah.
then you're no longer that person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you're nobody. The fact that, like, you're really you got nothing to do. You're not doing anything yet. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would tell people, don't be afraid of that.
I
Yeah.
think niches are so important just because they actually magnetize you to the right people, because when you hire someone for a niche, you're saying you in this one specific area, this one stream, whether it's like you're the guy who can fit roofs with this one type of shingle, like
Mhm,
you're the best at it, or you're the documentary filmmaker who does stories about people in running, like Mike. What happens is people who want to hire the right people and spend the right money are usually the people you want to work with,
mhm,
who are like, I need the person who's the best in this one area.
For sure.
So what ends up happening is I find you get hired by the right people, because the people who want to spend less money and are a hassle to work with are usually the person who's looking for a deal, who doesn't need an expert. They just want
right.
someone to get the job done. So I find it, like, it is counterintuitive, but when you find your niche, you're actually going to be working with people who want to pay someone well to do that one thing very well. And me
100%.
and Mike even find that when we're hiring, it's like we don't love hiring people who are a jack of all trades. We want to hire people who are amazing in this one area.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you strike a important point there, Mark, because like Mike, you're talking about niching on like subject matter, a certain topic or experience, but there's so many ways to have so many different ways to find a niche. And Mark, you're kind of pointing that out with it could even be like the type of gear you use, it could be the way you tell a story, it could
Mhm,
be even like more about the audience that you reach, you know? So
mhm.
there's so many different ways that people can niche without necessarily it just being about what you talk about.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like, you have to get good. Like, there
Yeah.
and we say this to our students all the time in the art documentary is, like, we can talk theory, we can talk ideas and story, conflict, all this as much as we want, but you've gotta get good. And having something specific where, your comfort zone, it's like what's that? It's like the Gladwell analogy of the being the big fish in the small pond is more
Right.
advantageous
Hmm.
because your confidence goes up, your skill set, you don't always feel diminished. You don't feel like I just think, Mark, you can speak on this, but guys who try to go through the film industry and start at the bottom of the ladder, like it's so overwhelming. Like we just tell our students, go get a camera, find a story, and go make it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Have
100%.
something made. Like you go that route, and you're always very low,
Mhm.
and it's hard. It's really hard to get your confidence and to get to that point where you can make something.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
So often the best cinematographers are often the ones who lasted, like they're the ones
Yeah.
who are, they really did have that staying power. And that's, if you want to go a more traditional route in your career, specifically talking about filmmaking, is you have to have endurance. You really do. And I think I mean, even if you go freelance and you build your own career that way, I think it really is endurance, is staying power is half the battle.
Yeah, I think that applies to every industry. A lot of our listeners are marketers, creators. Like it really
Hmm.
applies to all of those industries too. But Mike, you mentioned students. Let's talk about art of documentary. Why did you guys start a course? Like you're both very busy. You've got lots of projects. Like take us back to what was the thought or idea for starting this course?
You want me to start, Mark?
Yeah. I mean, well, it
It
kind
was
of,
it
yeah.
was the same. I mean, we had like the absolute perfect combination, being that I had so much knowledge with the online marketing world because I've done a lot of filming for my brother's a huge online fitness coach, and I've worked with a bunch of companies that are fully online. And I understood how the whole funnel process worked. Even I know it's weird talk for a filmmaker, but I spent a lot of my career. That was all my corporate work was with online marketers, successful ones too. So I had a very good grasp of like how we would do this. And it was during the pandemic. Work had slowed a bit, but less about that. I think it was more us seeing that, there was an opportunity, seeing how everything was going online. I think we just started talking, being like, why don't we put our knowledge online? And Mark had
Yeah.
obviously, the big thing is Mark had the YouTube channel. Like
the hardest part of this is having an audience. And Mark had watered his audience for 2 years, built this amazing following of trusted people, and had never sold them anything. And so, you know, the tendency in the marketing world is you oversell. Mark had undersold. And so the students were just, I think, Mark, you did a poll, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny. You kind of stumble into these things just for fun. One day, in the middle of the pandemic, I put a poll up on my YouTube community page, which people don't actually know exists. It's this tab, which is like just a Twitter feed for YouTubers. And I put up, I was like, hey, does anyone want me to do a course? And I put up 3 options: no, yes, and yes if it's free. And we had 800 responses, and over 50% of them were like yes. And so I just showed it to Mike one day and was like, I was like, I don't know, maybe this is a thing. And then Mike's like, yeah, let's do it. And that's partially one of the reasons why I love working with Mike, is it's very black and white decisions in that way. And so we were like, okay, let's. I think I brought that conversation up to you in like September 2019, and so that was pre-pandemic. And I was like, let's do it this November. We're like, sure.
Was it
November.
really?
Yeah, November we blew right past November. And it wasn't until like March 2020, in the height of the pandemic, when everything was shut down, I brought it back up to Mike, was like, do you want to do this? And we're like, yeah, I mean, doesn't looks like the world's shut down for the foreseeable future.
We are in a unique position as well, because the whole online marketing game is like, we're market, like, we're filmmakers, but we have all the cameras and editing. Like, we knew, like, that's the expense. I mean, that's, getting the eyeballs, getting your traffic, and creating the content. And so Mark had the eyeballs, and we could do the content at cost, just paying our editors and our time.
Mhm.
And so it was really, but I'll say, like, it started honestly with the idea of just putting a one-time course out there. Like, we had no vision. Maybe the vision was definitely not set
I
in
didn't even
stone.
want to do Zoom calls.
No, you didn't even. No, I
We
pushed
do
you.
group Zoom calls once a month with others. And initially I was like, no, I just want to put the course out
We
there.
want to put the course out there, no touch at all after
Yeah, I
that.
was like, I don't think anyone's gonna buy it. Let's just get it
Set
out
it
See
and
and
if
then
we
like
can
forget
move
it.
make a
on.
few
Yeah,
dollars, help a few people.
yeah.
And then after that first response, it was clear that, like, there was a real thirst for people wanting an alternative to online film school, or an
Yeah.
alternative to film school, doing it in
Yeah.
an
A,
online
a, a
version.
hundred people joined it in the first 10 minutes when we opened it up.
Wow. And
Yeah, it
and do you
was
think most of that was from your YouTube community, Mark?
Oh,
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice.
and it still almost all is. Now
yeah.
we've just started, like, Instagram.
Well, we don't even pay for advertising. We
No,
still just do
it's
it
all
organically.
organic.
And I think that's me and Mike both have found that like documentary careers are exhausting if you're not careful with how you spool out your energy.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, like, we really believe in the medium of documentary. And so it's so sad to see so many people go down trying to start a documentary film and then never finish it because there is no roadmap. And it is a very like, you're on your own, like, figure it out, and the budgets are small. And so part of our heart behind art of documentary is like, we believe in our community. We believe in this, these hundreds and hundreds of filmmakers in the AOD community, and we don't want to see these stories either die in people's brain or die in the edit or die before they ever get shot. And so we were like, that was the byline to art of documentary, was the complete guide to telling documentary films, compelling
Mhm.
films. And we were like, let's just take the mystique, the mystery, let's just give some really hard signposts along the way for this journey in filmmaking. And it really seemed to resonate with people, and it's been incredible. And so I don't know, Mike, it's been so gratifying seeing people like have their careers and lives change, getting to start and put out their first films, and in turn, build a career as a filmmaker.
Yeah, that's awesome. I looked into some of the modules that you offer, and as someone who's not technical, some of the ones that caught my eye were like how to pitch a film and how to be a good interviewer. Are those some of those like maybe aspects of filmmaker that maybe people don't get? Because the technical side, I'm sure there's so many resources for that, but those
Yeah.
soft skills like are maybe some of the things that people don't maybe understand the weight of those things, like how to
Mhm.
get funding for your film, those kind of things. Is that what you had in mind?
The Yes, I think module 1, when we first came out, as Mark described, it was really trying to create a roadmap, being like a systematic form, something a little more formulaic that was from concept all the way to releasing at festivals,
Hmm.
like in every step in between. It was sort of like we now look at it as that was sort of our first year university course. And now if module 2 now, what we learned from module 1 was that is enough for our students to kind of get the tools they need. We've had amazing success of students getting into significant film festivals, getting broadcast deals, like just using the information in that course. But now what we're passionate about and why we came out with module 2 is like we really want to see our students move from being videographers to filmmakers.
Mhm.
And a big difference with a filmmaker is there's a voice. There's these other things. There's the voice, there's a philosophy, there's perspective. There's these nuanced things that when you see a film by a filmmaker, like, oh, that's Quentin Tarantino because he does all these eclectic music and whatever. He's got all these stylistic choices he makes that make him who he is. The dialogue is long and all of this, right? And so I think we're now trying and this is all how as Mark and I are maturing and growing is like learning ourselves. That's sort of what we're trying to do is bring them along that journey and help mature them. So, as we kind of come out with new modules, it's really just trying to make them more filmmakers, like have a voice in this world because we get this all the time on our calls. They're like, oh, and Mark knows what I'm about to say, but I want to do this COVID business film or something. And I'll say this all the time. It's like, listen, there's nothing wrong with that, but just know this. We've been pitched 100 stories of people wanting to open they want to film a story about a local business trying to survive COVID. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but you've got to have your unique voice. It's like a love story has been told 100 times, but you can still tell a Blue Valentine is the example I use of Derek C in France, where it's like it's it's like you've never seen a love story like that, and then I could tell one that's going to be different because it's got my voice to it. And so that's really what we're trying, I think, to help our students with now is find their voice, which is
Mhm.
that's a lifetime process, as life experiences come into your life, you then put that into your work. And so it's really cool seeing our students now, like you kind of see a style develop, you kind of see the subjects and people they're drawn to. It's more than just trying to go create content.
Yeah, I wanna take that module, like, how
Yeah,
to find your voice. I feel like everyone
Mhm.
needs to do that. Any
seriously.
creator needs to do that, whether
Yeah,
you're making a film or just doing
absolutely.
TikToks or whatever, like, what is that voice that's kinda
Hmm.
going through all the content that you're producing?
Exactly. Yeah, and your philosophy, like like I ask some questions all the time and someone else if Mark and I both go to a particular subject matter, Mark's going to ask different questions that have influenced his life and I'll ask different questions that have influenced my life and it will produce a slightly different film.
Mhm.
And I think that is the beauty is like kind of what are the questions you've asked yourself and have gotten you through your life and what are the what's the lens you see the world through? That's how you're going to see your subjects and that's what you'll bring to your projects. And I think that's really under taught.
Definitely. I want to talk a little bit about your students. I'm curious on one hand, in general, like what are you hoping that your students will walk away with at the end of this course, if you could summarize that? But then secondly, more on a granular level, are there like one or two stories of students that you've had so far that really stick in your mind of like, man, if we can make that type of impact with more people, that would be amazing.
Oh, yeah, there's loads, hey, Mike? I
Yeah, you
just
should
think
talk about Layla. I mean, I think
yeah,
just she wouldn't mind. I mean,
yeah,
she's our poster child.
well, even Layla or, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he lives in Lebanon. We had one student when we reached out to everyone and just said, "Hey, we're looking for some testimonials," when we did our latest launch in September. And you're kind of floored when you're having people saying like, this course has changed my life. Like I'm now getting clients and I'm actually working full time as a filmmaker and directing. And yeah, I think when Mike mentions Layla, we had a student who uh, you know, single parent family and just trying to make a new reinvent
Single
herself.
mother.
Single mother, yeah, and trying to reinvent herself right now in as a filmmaker, and sawed off. It just I love it. She bites off more than she can chew at times, and it's great because she really sticks with it, and she's completed her first film, and it's getting into festivals, and now she's just finished her second film, and she's going on to her third film, and it's
She's
just
getting pitched work now. Like
yeah,
Oh,
she's
Wow.
wow.
people are pitching her work, and
Wow.
it's and we watched that happen in just less than 18 months of like we've only known her since a little over a year ago, and so yeah, a lot less than that, and it's that's been super rewarding, and we don't even love calling them students anymore. We're trying to kind of change our vernacular to calling them filmmakers because really we want them to know that that's what they can be and that me and Mike are walking that same journey alongside them. We're their peers, and maybe we've completed some more films than people in our course, but we really want to aspire the AOD community to just do that, like be filmmakers. Like, a filmmaker makes a film, they finish it, and that's what we're really trying to instill in them. Is that it's not about right now this being the best film ever made. It's about it getting finished because there's things you'll learn just by hitting the final export and then going to a festival and then hearing feedback about your film. There's things that you'll learn that you would never learn if you just spent your whole life not finishing a film. And so we're really want to encourage them to do that, and that's been super fun. Mike, just seeing
Mhm.
people take those steps in their life and their career.
Yeah, what to me is really exciting about art of documentary, which wouldn't have been even possible a decade ago, is where the technology has come. And I'm not someone who usually, I don't like talking about technology, but it's gotten to a point where filmmaking is now like what photography is, in the sense of a photographer. I was with a war photographer yesterday in New York. This guy was captured in Syria and was telling me his story, and his whole art form, his whole craft is done on his own. He flies in, I was just like, wow, that's incredible. And then I was like, that's not so far different from what we do actually now. Like with the last couple of my films have been alone, and I think that to me is what's really exciting with AOD is we're able to not just teach this kind of theory and the technical, but the technology is so good now that this amazing cinematic craft can be done by one person, more or less. Like, you can go out and monitor audio with an amazing camera. The focus is phenomenal now. Like, it's easy to do. It used to just be complicated, cumbersome. Even in the 90s, like, you'd have four-person crews, and it still didn't look that great. Like, big films now are adapting this kind of minimal touch process, and I think that to me is what's really exciting with our students, as Mark was saying, is like they're actually able to make stuff that looks good and feels really good, and it's an exciting time. It's competitive landscape, but yeah, it's exciting for students to at least be able to have a vision. They see someone on the streets, or they hear this story, they have this vision on how their voice would be a unique voice to tell it, and they can almost use their phone at this point to go capture it and get it out there and use these platforms, whatever, YouTube or whatever else, to get it seen. And it's amazing. It's an amazing time.
Love it.
It is amazing.
This is a bit of a tangent, but you mentioned technology, and I'm just curious. Like, obviously, Mark, you've got a great community on YouTube, which is kind of like an emerging technology. Not really emerging these days, but there's other video formats like TikTok and short form video that are getting a lot of attention, a lot of speed, a lot of uses. Do you think that technology and social media maybe has influenced your like the documentary scene in any way? Or do you think it's been a positive influence, a negative influence? Like, I know that Instagram greatly influenced photography as a craft because
Hmm.
it made it accessible for everyone. Everyone could be a photographer, and everyone thought they were a photographer, and that can be empowering to see so many people adopt that, and also maybe a bit frustrating for people who are really good at it. But I'm curious, from your perspective, like both of you are such established filmmakers, do you feel that things like TikTok and short form video has had a positive or negative impact on your industry?
Me and Mike talk about this. I think I used to get more upset about this, but I would say the thing that has been the worst influence on filmmaking, or we will see this, is the 2 times speed button on Netflix. and I'm not even being facetious. It's like the fact that you take an art form like filmmaking that's perseverated and worked on in an edit suite, pacing and timing, and then it can be treated like an audiobook that you just want to blast through and watch. And even the fact that it changes the way that you perceive the frame rate, it looks like a totally different frame rate. It's like it's just really strange. It's like listening to music on fast forward. Why would you ever
Mm.
listen to music on fast forward? And the fact that we have that, so maybe that's a holdover, or not a holdover, just like a spillover in terms of influence from this TikTok, Vine culture where it's like very short form. But I've learned though that uh, just because something isn't popular doesn't mean it's not of value. And so some of my films I've made, I think of Battleground. Yeah, I did well, got Vimeo staff picks and all that, but it wasn't a YouTube video that's getting hundreds of millions of views. But, you're still getting emails from people saying this impacted me. And I've realized like, and that's where me and Mike have really tried. We're using Art of Documentary and this whole ecosystem we've built to just pursue the films we're passionate about and not necessarily care how much of a commercial success they are, because if they're aligning with our passions, then we're feeling fulfilled. And that's something that you could get a video of 10 million views and you may not feel fulfilled as an artist. So I'm more so these days, and I'll let Mike speak to this himself, but I'm more so pursuing the idea of having my passions align with my schedule, like building my fulfillment as an artist that way. So yeah, I used to be on YouTube, and I used to be really upset by seeing people calling themselves filmmakers. I'm like, that guy's not a filmmaker, but I don't care now. It's like they're working, they're doing their thing. And so I kind of worry just about what's happening on my edit timeline and others.
Hmm. Yeah, I lot to say on so you know I think Netflix obviously has done a lot of, it's given a lot of filmmakers opportunities. I've had several films on Netflix, so I'm, thankful for that. And but I think at the same time, it's a new content creator. When Mark talks about watching, it's, the art form, has become diminished, and there's a reason teenagers don't watch TV shows anymore. They watch TikTok. Like you try to get a teenager to sit down and watch 6 hours of a drama. Like, good luck. Like, it'd be very hard, right? Like, it's in that way, it's sad for me personally, growing up with just a huge love for film. I don't know if it'll last. I think an art, art is art. If art is art, it should stand the test of time, and something great should be great forever. And so, yeah, I think for my personal, kind of what Mark was talking about there, kind of you have to kind of come to terms with who you are and what you're making. There's still a ton of filmmakers out there that and the festivals that are really trying to they honor, real high caliber art form. And so TikTok's here now, and something else will come. And I think I mean, there is something fun about. There's something. It's like McDonald's. Like, there is something enjoyable about it in some way. It's just, again, you can't confuse the two.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
don't. And for me, it really comes to the process. How does a filmmaker make a film? Take a Chloe Zhao, who makes Nomadland or something, versus a TikToker. Look at the process by which those two products came into existence. That's how I kind of try to look at things. The process matters, and I think we try to make the process as systematic, as automated as possible. And what we teach our students is, that to take the long road.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it's very gratifying.
Speaking of process, Mike, you had mentioned a few minutes ago that you can create a whole cinematic film as one person by yourself. On that note, I'm curious why you and Mark work together. Why do you
You know,
choose to,
when
like
I say one per, three people, let's say, very
all right.
small, very small crews.
Yeah.
I mean, I think someone
But
like
some days you go out on clear sky,
some days,
by yourself.
and Ray, I did on his name is Ray. Like, I shot 95% of that on my own, 98% of that, really. The point being, you can have very small teams, and Mark, I'm sure, will echo this. It's a really hard business, lugging around tripods and heavy bags and waiting for sun, and the shot just doesn't look like you imagine. Like, it's not glamorous. Like, making films is the act like the final product's amazing. The dreaming process at the start's amazing, but production is not. It's tough. It's really hard. So I think one of the reasons Mark and I work together and do so well together is we like each other. And I think there's a lot to that. Like, you should work with when things are this hard, you should work with people you like, because you know similar values, similar sense of humor. It just They're long days, shit happens, and you're like, we're not getting anything today, but you can both you're both there and feel the same
Mhm.
way. So
Mhm.
we tell our students all the time, like, don't always, it's not always about the best, you being around the best person, but it's who be around someone who makes you better. Who's the best team? Like, and that's not having the most elite person. It's somehow the average of not the best makes the best.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think Mark and I have found that we're careful with who we let into our circle of um, collaborators, and for that reason, because it can become toxic too. Like, the
Yeah.
creative process, it's
Yeah.
a lot of egos. You feel like God for a second when you've come up with an idea. Like, you think you've come up with something out of thin air, like a magician or something. And so you got to be careful. I think that's probably why Mark and I get along, is our egos we aren't big, and if they get too big, we keep each other in check, and it's just enjoy it.
Us too.
Yeah.
So, Mark,
Yeah.
Yeah.
did you decide to work with Mike so that he could carry your tripods around, or because you actually like him?
Oh, there's a funny photo. We should.
Oh
There,
yeah, that one from Africa. Yeah. Um,
you keep
yeah.
talking, Mark.
No, I think one of the really helpful things for Mike and I that's worked so well, and I've realized, kind of reflecting on this, because some people in my world are always like, you and Mike just seem to really collaborate well, and like doesn't seem like there's much tension. And I've realized that both Mike and I, like he said, our philosophy, and in some ways, even maybe not necessarily all of our theology, but even our spiritual perspectives, some way orbit each other. But also, I would say, really on just a practical level, when working in business with someone, is we both have the same philosophy on how we view what money is.
Hmm.
And so for Mike and I, money is a tool. It's something to be used. It's something to be also saved, but it needs to be used. And so, and then also, to at the end of the day, it's like, what we're more excited about, you can see Mike's film posters behind me, like that's the reward, is creating those projects and having our families. And so what's really great is where you see a lot of business relationships or creative relationships fall apart when it comes down to the money, is me and Mike, I would say, like, both have the same philosophy around that, so there's not that tension in terms of working that way. And we've also, to be clear, me and Mike both also do a lot of projects not with each other. We both have separate businesses. There it is. That's in Kenya,
This is Kenya.
2014, on the
Yeah.
Rift Valley.
February 2014. Yeah,
Mike's carrying the tripod.
Love
Mark's
it.
got the camera, I'm sure.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Light's terrible, but
The
Yeah.
photo evidence.
Nice.
yeah.
The photo evidence. But yeah, so it's I find that when I'm interviewing people to work with them, or bringing people on the project, is I want to know one thing: is so much of filmmaking is kind of philosophizing. Like you're constantly pontificating and talking about these ideas, and it's like, I want to have someone I can enjoy to have a conversation with,
Yeah.
because so many of our ideas come out of conversation. And like, some of the best moments for art of documentary or for our films have come in the car rides Mike and I have from Toronto to Bowmanville on Mike's latest film that I'm helping with, Clear Sky. It's like, it's that conversation that it comes about. And to me, it's why I love podcasts, and talking to people like yourselves. Like, conversation is one of the most beautiful. It's like a meal that you get to have in life with others, and I
Mhm.
really cherish that. And so, yeah, I want to surround people with who are interesting,
Absolutely.
essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe I'm getting a little philosophical here, but I think in addition to what you're saying, I find that having someone that you like, that you have similar views with, that you can do the work with, is also beneficial, because I feel like creativity is like a responsibility, like it's a bit of a burden, especially when you're telling a story that really matters or like might make a difference. Do you guys find that there's a benefit for the two of you there as well, where you're kind of like sharing this creative responsibility or burden of the project or story that you're working on?
Yeah, I would say, Mike, like we both have different skill sets. Like I come from a commercial background, and so I'm often wanting to bring more gear on set. But Mike comes from the independent filmmaker who is running around like an Olympic track trying to film people, and not. And so it's like Mike's like, let's use less gear, and it's great because we challenge each other with. There's even different perspectives that Mike is much better at audio than I am, as you guys could probably tell before this podcast. And so it's like there's areas that we really complement each. And so I think one thing to say is you don't want to just find carbon copies of each other. I would
Mhm.
Yeah.
say, and so I find that I do like I like knowing that when I'm with Mike on set, he's going to have a different perspective than me, and so we get to challenge each other on them and then figure out what works best.
Yeah, I'd add with the creative idea, like, you know, for me, I've used this with our students, but it's important to remember that like creativity, I mean, this is what I believe. Creativity can't be forced. It's a lot about your environment. It's a lot about your routine. Like it has to be as natural as a masonry doing the bricks on a house has to be like that. That has to be. And so for me, I've never. I think one reason I do well in a setting when I'm with people like Mark or other colleagues who I've been with for my whole career, it's just the water I swim in. It's not trying to have to find a creative idea. I think that's when the worst ideas come because it's too forced. It's not truthful. It's trying to be original, and usually when you try to be original, you end up if it doesn't feel natural. Whereas if you just tell the truth, you're usually original. And and so I feel like that's probably a big advantage of just being in an environment where people you're comfortable is because it's just like it feels like you're home.
Mhm.
You're able to do your best work, more frequently, and you're not afraid to fall down, you're not afraid to make mistakes, you're not afraid to say stupid things. And I think by doing like if you're in a sometimes too competitive of a creative environment type of thing, like agencies or things like this, it's you can tell when something's, I don't know, Mark, what the word is, but you have more experience in kind of the like always looking for high level creative concepts. That's hard. Like that's hard for that stuff to be natural. Like it's
Hmm. Hmm.
and so I think we've done well just being comfortable.
What attracts me and Mike both to documentary is we love discovering a world that we've never been in and then immersing ourselves in that where other filmmakers may want to create a world.
Mm.
Denis
Wow.
Villeneuve wants to go create Dune, like this, but I find me and Mike, when we go, you see our film Kill or Be Killed this past summer, we both arrived at Joel's house. We're on his front yard, and there's like, boxing equipment, a big truck, and like, just all this. It was this world, this jungle of bravado and MMA, and we're just like, this is fascinating. Someone lives this way.
Perfect. Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
we
we're
don't
like,
need to we don't need to touch anything.
yeah, exactly. Mike looked at Mike, and we joked. We're like, this would, I looked at Mike and said, on the commercial sets I work on, we would have paid a team
Yeah.
3 days, $50,000 to build this set. But
To
Yeah.
get
this is,
to get half the way there.
yeah, but I'm like, but this is the way this guy lives. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of I'm really realizing these days, if I can separate my ego away from my art, then I can just embrace the process. And so for me and Mike, it's like we want to create big films, but we want to have all the gear in one bag. And it's not that that's the whole thing, but what I mean by that is we just want to walk into a world and find the perspective, and that's super fun to me. That's what we did with Riscate. When Mike, gets the chance to release His Name Is Ray, you'll see it from that. I love Mike's film His Name Is Ray because we often pass these people who are panhandling on the city streets who live a houseless life, living full time on the streets, and you're always like, wonder what that's like. But it's like Mike spent a year in that world with his camera and captured that perspective. So yeah, I find it a what am I trying to say? A privilege to be a documentary filmmaker because we're allowed into these environments that normally you may not be allowed into, but because we're storytellers, we get this weird permission to do it, and
Hmm.
it's super fun.
That's so interesting. On that note of like immersing yourself into a world rather than creating it, like do you find, my guess is you do, but I want to know like do you find that you're going in blind sometimes when you're shooting and not really knowing what's going to happen and then having to almost
Absolutely.
create the narrative afterwards or like reverse engineer it?
Well, I think you should never go into a project without understanding. Like you have full permission. We tell this to our AOD student filmmakers. Like you have full permission to go into a project not knowing the tension, as we call, like what's driving the character in the film, to explore that. But you should never venture and say, "I'm going to make this film about this person," and have no idea what the magnet is that's pulling the
Mm,
plot of the film. Like we try to take complex things and simplify them, but then still acknowledge that they're very complex. Like, what is a good plot in a film? Well, I mean, you could go on for days about this, but simply we just say like your character has to have a desire. They have to want something, and we have to. And if they don't want something, then we are not going to care about them. We need to know that they are journeying to accomplish something that can be altruistic. It can be physical, like in the case of uh, transcend. Wesley wanted to win an election. But then, what's fun is then you get to go all the layers underneath that. Why does he want to win an election? Why does this matter? And then that's when you build like a real timeless film. So, but if you look at any film, any Hollywood film, the characters want something. So that's just what we distill down. But to answer your question, Mike, you can kind of know that general idea, but then yeah, absolutely, we will go into days where we're like, let's see what happens. But we generally have an idea of what we would hope to happen or
Mhm.
hope to unfold on camera.
When do you know that you found the story that you just have to tell? Like, I know you said that you just kind of go into people's worlds, and I'm sure you figure out like what does the character want, but like how do you know that like this is the story that I'm gonna just dive into for 2 years and immerse myself? Like
Mm.
what are the factors that play into deciding that that's the story?
I'll let Mike answer that.
I'll be honest, and I've thought a lot about this because I know story is king or story is queen or story trumps all. But like as I start looking back on how I've made some choices on what projects to do, it the story's been important, but I've never really even talked about this. But it for me, it does go back to those days of philosophy, my university studies where I had to find an idea, and it had to be a good idea. If you're going to write 60 pages or 100 pages, it better be a really good idea that can support 90 minutes of viewing time. And so it's not you're for me, the gamble, I often take the gamble of the idea over the story. Meaning if I feel there's a really interesting idea here, I will gamble and say I hope I am going to take the chance that the story will follow suit and that the story will unfold. Because and I it's the story is so difficult if you're trying to create a really authentic documentary, because just so much can happen, so much can change in 1 year or 2 years, but the idea doesn't change. So to answer your question, it's like if I have a strong, let's use Transformer, the documentary about it's the world's strongest man becoming a woman.
Mike
And
directed this, but yeah.
yeah, sorry, because you had the poster behind you. But so the idea in that film that was so intriguing to me was that the strongest man in the world, who had spent his whole life building these slabs of armor, 250 pounds of muscle, 5% body fat, integers dominated his life. I can bench 700 pounds and all of this, was going to lose those integers to become a woman. That idea was so compelling for me because I knew there's no way he's going to be able to do that. Like, you can't give up those. That's like someone on Wall Street working their whole life to become a billionaire and then walk away. Doesn't happen, because that's your identity. And so that idea, what was the story going to be? I didn't know. I didn't know that the ex-wife wasn't gonna wanna be on camera. I didn't know that the brothers weren't gonna wanna be on camera. You know, had I known all that stuff and that made if I let that make my decision, I may have not even pursued it because there were a lot of things we weren't able to get from a story perspective. But the idea was really frigging compelling, and, you know, it ended up working. I don't know if that always happens, but that's just been my experience so far looking back. Same with Transcend. It was the idea that all long distance runners have faith in something, some higher power. And that idea ended up it developed this incredible story. And so Clear Sky, I don't know. So I'm not giving you a clear answer that it's more just a thought that I've been having lately
Mhm.
about like kind of what is more important, the story or the idea that the soil that the story is going to be built upon, because again, we just don't have any control.
Yeah.
Mhm.
um
I would say to try to distill it down, you know, Mike, because me and Mike have taught this in AOD. We talk about the passion gauntlet, like this idea that you have to ask yourself, like, does your character have passion? Is are you like, would an audience be passionate, like, do people have interest in the story? And then the most important thing, and I think this is what really take away those other two things, this is the deciding factor. And what, you know, I've been in moments with Mike where we looked, you know, when we looked at Clear Sky, me and Mike were like, yeah, let's do this, like, and it instantaneously is, are you passionate about it? So it's, I've been approached about really cool like YouTube has provided me this incredible platform now where people are constantly pitching me documentaries, and some of them are just incredible stories, people driving around the world on a unicycle or whatever it is, but it's like, I'm not passionate about that, and so I refuse to take on that project, because if it doesn't get me excited in that moment, it's not going to get me excited when I'm 3 years into an edit, you
Yeah.
know. And so I think ultimately, what, like Mike was talking about, when you're just like, wow, this is so compelling, is like, does this, and I don't know how to describe it. It's like an artist saying like, "Oh, that's a good song," you know, like when there's people making music. But for us, there's this moment, and I couldn't express it until you feel it yourself, where you're like, "Oh, that's, this, I need to do this idea." Like when
the idea's got to grip you. Like whatever's happening in that moment in that character's life needs to keep me up at night to be like, I got to see where this is going to go. If the moment that you catch your character is that powerful, and it's the right moment, and you're there and you catch lightning in the bottle when that character is saying something that's real and truthful, like I don't care what's going to happen, because the audience is going to experience that in the opening few minutes of the film, and they just want to know. And yeah, that's been my experience so far with it.
Love it.
It's
That's compelling.
yeah.
I want more of that type of story or like creativity or even feeling in marketing. I feel like I don't get that as much
Mm.
as I'd like. So Mitzi, that's our homework.
Because it's, you know, and I know, you know, we have to, Mark and I have to market, you know, we have a course, and I do marketing for lots of company, and it's because it's a different goal.
Mhm.
Like the goal in marketing is to sell, almost always. I mean, there has to be an ROI. If you're
Mhm.
paying videographers and editors, you know, there's a cost associated with that, and to recoup that cost and to turn a profit, you know, you have to. And with what I've found so empowering doing art of documentary, it's provided, you know, a financial component where I don't need to care anymore if his name is Ray, or Clear Sky make any money. And so it's in that way, I think you can take that risk, and where it's really hard to do that in a marketing context. But, you know, maybe some of the big commercials, you think back on like the Macintosh, you know, that famous Macintosh commercial, right? Where like the Brave New World scene, I don't know if you
yeah,
remember, where he's
she
like,
throws a sledgehammer.
yeah, like they're that's bravery, you
Yeah.
know. And you know, got companies like Nike and why, like some of the big agencies do try to do that, obviously. But from, yeah, you're right though, Mike. Like I do wish, I do wish that entrepreneurs, small businesses would take those chances, and
Blue
you
Star
know,
did.
yeah, Greg did. Like in some of my companies that I've worked with have taken that, and I think the problem is, I feel is like it's not formulaic. Like you can't do it every time.
No.
Mhm.
Like, you know, it's like trying to catch lightning, trying to get, and that's why that's why you take a year off of doing a doc, because you don't, that idea doesn't just come. And I think in a marketing business world, it's like you need content tomorrow. You got your content calendar.
Yeah.
It's like I gotta, and so you're finding the best system that you can get, close to that. But yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
They're just
And
so maybe, but I mean, maybe you're right though. Maybe like you could do one a year or something. Maybe the goal is to do a couple a year that have that magic, and you really, let go of all your metrics and all your algorithms, and just do what you really feel you've got to do for your company or your
Mhm.
product.
yeah, for sure. I think it takes some level of bravery for a brand as well, like to suddenly for a moment not be trying to sell something, but more like focus on a person or a community, or like
Hmm.
tell some kind of story that doesn't have that hard CTA at the end, but
Yes.
it still
Yeah.
connects to the audience you're trying to connect with. But
Totally.
that stuff gets me excited. So we'll
I
figure out a way to
I
do it.
I I think you need to I think we don't realize that our brands are made up of people, so in turn, they are a living organism, and I think the same way that you need to take time to go do something you enjoy as a human, you need to read that book, you need to go hang out with the family, play football, whatever it is, your brand needs to do that. So,
Yeah.
for me, sometimes with my YouTube even, I don't care sometimes if certain videos don't do well. It's like, I love that video,
Yeah.
so it's like, I'm gonna do it because for the health of my brand, it needs time to enjoy what it likes, you know?
Mhm.
And if it's always about what the audience likes, then you're living for someone else, and then
Yeah.
Right.
your happiness is
You're just
attached to
pandering.
yeah, oh, and that's exhausting.
Mhm.
And I was gonna to return way back to what Mitzi asked about TikTok and all that. I do think, unfortunately, the two things that these types of platforms do is one is they take young artists who might have had a different path in another era. I mean, one thing it does, it gives them opportunity to create. I don't want to disparage that, but what it really does do is it tells them that they have to go down this one path to be successful. It defines success as like getting a million views in an hour or whatever. But then also,
Yeah.
what I find the most underwhelming thing, and I'm like, why it so repulses me as a platform is there's like 6 songs that you use, and you have to do this. You have to throw your shirt on the ground and then appear in a new like everyone does, and maybe that's fun. You're like, hey, we all know the same. I just don't know as a creative. I'm like, why would I want to go make the exact same film that Mike has made? And then
Mhm.
like I am okay with being like, I'll make a film where I'm like, we're doing everything center frame. We're inspired by Wes Anderson, but then to do just to go do
The same
Moonrise
thing.
Kingdom, it's like I just don't. It to me, it's a really
Yeah.
confusing platform that way where I'm like I can't believe there's this many content creators wanting to replicate exactly what someone else did.
Right.
And
Hmm.
that's scary to me if that's what we're saying success is. That's
Mhm.
strange. But I guess we all try to right now. I was reading an article, all the algorithm, we're all decorating our homes the exact same way. We're putting I have
I
a money
know.
tree too, Mike.
We
It's like
talked about that.
we
We've talked about that before. And it's like we're all
yeah.
kind of like our tastes and our creativity and what we want to put out in the world with even the kind of content we all desire to make is influenced by these algorithms that are telling us what's cool.
Wow.
One thing that I do think what you were saying about like people replicating the same kind of video over and over again, one thing I do appreciate about TikTok is that it even if you're jumping on a trend, you have to like kind of stop and think like what's my unique take on this or what's my unique POV on this certain song or
Mm,
whatever, like this trend. And I do appreciate that side of it because I have seen like the trends do get like kind of repetitive and old, but then someone does it in a way that makes you laugh and it's like, oh, I would have never thought of doing it that way. Or like that's funny that they pulled that kind of component of their life
Yeah.
into this trend. So
It
Hmm.
definitely is iteration over originality, though. Like,
totally.
yeah. We only have a couple minutes left, and I selfishly want to talk about YouTube because, like I said, I'm a marketer. But I just want to know a little bit about time and effort. Like, how long does it really take to build that solid subscriber base? Mark, I know you've been doing it for a couple of years now. And was there any single video or strategy that helped you guys grow the most in that platform?
yeah, so there's what's fascinating is the chunk of time my channel did its worst in terms of overall volume and metrics, if you were to just go by the YouTube stats button, uh, that time, in a way, it made me and Mike our biggest profit with Art of Documentary. And so, what I don't, I guess we're in this world until our AOD dies. Like God forbid, we want to create it into more than just a course. We want to create a community and make it a production company and all sorts of things. And we have a really cool summit coming up with some of Hollywood's bests, which we'll be talking about on December 4th.
Okay.
Ooh.
Um, but where I would say, just to say that I've really hit the documentary niche hard, and so in turn, it's like I look at it like if I make a video and it gets 20,000 views, and it's about, but I also, well, every once in a while I do a video about frame rates just for fun because that gets me like a million views. Well, not really, like 500,000 views, and gets me like 10,000 new subscribers. If I talk about frame rates, for some reason, the algorithm likes when Mark Bone talks about frame rates, and you just stumble into these things.
Mhm.
But I'm more passionate of talking about documentary. But what I'm saying is that video with 200,000 views about frame rates, I don't know how much that actually helps my business. It helps it when a brand comes and says, "Oh, you get that many views, we'll pay you more money to advertise for us."
Mm.
But what I'm more excited about is when I get like 2,000 likes on a 20,000 view video about documentary, because I know there's 2,000 people there that are probably going to want to join Art of Documentary,
Mm.
or are passionate about really specific, obscure documentary lessons. Which, so I worry about my niche. It's good to grow an audience because there's a practicality. You can get paid 10 grand instead of 3 grand to mention story blocks or whatever if you're, if you hit certain metrics. But yeah, YouTube takes time. There's no such thing as passive income. Like people see these big, like you have to put time into it, and that's time. And again, you either have to be entertaining or educational on YouTube. But when you can do the two things at the same time, then that can really help grow a brand. Uh, and YouTube is this incredible platform where if you don't believe and care about what you're saying, I don't know what it is. People can tell, and you won't grow. There's some weird equation in the algorithm that just weeds out the people who don't actually care about what they're talking about. And so yeah, I think that's not to say it doesn't weed out the BS, because there's a lot of people who care about what they're talking about that are saying dumb things. But yeah, I don't know if that really, I don't think that really answers your question. But I guess I used to get really concerned when my videos wouldn't do well, but I'm more concerned about if the content is quality, because we find that real ROI is when people are like, holy crap, if this is what this guy's talking about for free on YouTube, what's beyond this paywall with
Yeah.
this art of documentary community? And then in turn, we have 100 videos, dozens and dozens of hours of long form, deep conversation, opening up our edit timelines, me and Mike discussing, showing emails to our, like, we really want someone to come out of art of documentary and feel equipped. And we should be selling the course for $5,000, but we want more people to be making better films. We believe it's going to be a better thing for life. And also too, we don't want that the actual purchase price to be to stop people from taking that next step in their career.
Love it. We're nearing the end of our interview here, and we'd like to ask our guests if there's one piece of advice that someone has given to you that has stuck and maybe shaped your way of thinking or shaped the way how you approach your career or your art or your work. If you could share that, each of you.
Mark first.
Oh dang.
I need time.
I know, I need time. um I'll say this. Mike's going to say something really artistic and philosophical, so I'll do nuts and bolts practical,
All right.
and I'll just say my my dad once said this to me about money, and he said money is a tool, and I know that's just seems so innocuous, like of course, but when the idea that it was this piece of material that could work for me, it made me, it was like, I remember because I he brought it up when I was actually going to buy my Canon 5D Mark III, and I just came out of film school. I've been out of film school for 2 years. I was doing terrible in the film industry, and then I got this job to go shoot a documentary in Haiti, and I was called my dad up and I was like, should I buy this camera? It's pretty much all I have, my money. And my dad just like was like, well, money is a tool, like, and you can use it as a tool to then buy the tool, the camera that you need to tell this story. And it was this moment I was
Mm.
like, I was so concerned. I was like, I need to save this money, Dad. I'm a poor filmmaker. And he was like, well, no, like use your money. Like it's part, it's one, it's like you have your camera, you have your lens, you have your money, you have your music. Like, it's not just this thing that I need to treat like this bar of gold that I can't touch. And it was when I bought that camera, and then I made that film. And then that film, like I can trace all my success back to making that one little documentary down in Haiti. And so I would say for artists, it's like look at it that way, maybe, perhaps, like that's why I say I love working with Mike because we have the same philosophy around money. Because it's like, yeah, we'll buy the cameras, we'll use the gear. Oh, and the gear's not good anymore, we'll sell it, but then we'll use that money to buy the next piece of gear. And it's not that we're being frivolous. It's not that we're just throwing money around. We're both pragmatic with the way we use it. But when you look at it as one part of your arsenal, to me, it's taken the pressure off as in this. I don't have to worry about being a starving artist. It's one it's one feature in my office is the money we have. It doesn't become the thing. We're making these films
Right.
for money.
Mhm.
It's like another commodity in Settlers of Catan. It's not the thing. It's like Monopoly. You play for money, but I love Settlers of Catan because it's like you have wheat, you have war. It's like kind of like that as a filmmaker. It's like you have your awards, you have your films, you have some money, you have your family. It's like it's all one of the aspects. So I would say, yeah, that was actually a really freeing thing because I think a lot of why I think that actually matters for artists is so many people make decisions in their career and what art they're creating based on money. But if you can look at it as something that's going to come into your hand and leave your hand, that might break, that might not work, that you might need to go get more of or less of, it's like that, then you're kind of free to focus
Yeah.
on other aspects that can benefit your career.
I love that, but you lost me at Settlers of Catan.
I'm much more a Carcassonne person. I do hate Settlers, to be honest.
You're getting
I like
further
that you
down the
can
rabbit
trade.
trail. Yeah.
No, I'm a big Carcassonne player, but yeah, Settlers of Catan people, I'm too much. I converse and I make absurd trades. I'll trade like 8 ore for 1 wheat
I
just because
could
I
see
want the
it.
game over.
I could see it. Mike, give us something artistic and
I
philosophical.
have no idea what game you guys are talking
Me
about.
either.
I I think mine was probably from my dad as well. Ironically, I was young and he was just telling me what is all every successful person have, and he gave some bad humans in history and some good humans in history, and the commonality amongst all of them was passion. Um, and as a for a creative, it's something that's said quite a bit, and I think um, it's something for me, what we've talked about, like it's so much of this process of trying to take an idea in your mind and see that through to the end, you know, and create something in you just face so many people who don't see it until they finally see it. They don't see it when it's 10% there. They don't see it when it's 90% there. Some people don't see it when it's 100% there. But for me, kind of that passion I have for telling somebody's story, or that idea I've talked about, that feeling I get the first time I talk to a character, and that passion I feel, that empathy, or that connectedness with somebody who I generally wouldn't talk to in life, but I do, and it just creates something, and just following through with that, um, because in your heart it's a real thing. Like it's something that I think creators. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would encourage creators to slow down a little bit, because passion is a very powerful thing, and when you've got it, and when you find it for the right thing, I do think it could make your career. But I think if you think you're passionate but you're kidding yourself, it's like marrying the wrong person or something. You can't trick yourself into being passionate about the right idea or the right project or the right idea. Like, listen, if it's not a great idea but it's paying well, then just do it and say, I'm doing this because it pays me a lot of money and that's why I'm doing it. It's not a great idea. I don't like doing it. But as Mark said, it's a tool. I need this money. So, for me, that notion of just kind of, I know it's a big word, but that passion of what you're trying to do with your career, where you want to go, and just trying to be true to that. And you know, yeah, I
No, that's good.
kind of fumbling over there, but I think it's just there's something inside each person that I think they know is there. And life can become, there's a lot of voices, it can become complicated, and that voice and vision, that thing, that desire you have, can just become too cloudy. And I think real great filmmakers have the ability to keep that innocent passion, that kind of, that pure connection with it for a long time.
Mm.
And that's a very enviable thing when you see somebody late in their career just still smiling and loving doing the thing they do because they've just been true kind of the whole time. And yeah, that's my goal is, don't get overcomplicated. Just follow those projects that I know I really want to do.
Come on, man.
It's great.
Love it. 1-2 punch to finish this off. First, who is making waves right now and why? And then where can listeners connect with you?
I mean, my guy,
Yeah.
my mentor, Derek Cianfrance, who I just was working with yesterday, but he's a guy who I've just looked up to my whole life, and he just signed. He just announced last week that he's going to be doing his first studio film. He's been like an indie guy, done an HBO series, but now he's doing a big studio film with Ryan Gosling. But he to me is who I want to be in a lot of ways, and it's not his films are amazing, but I believe in what he's just a guy, like I've talked about in my last answer there. He hasn't allowed the complications of the Hollywood industry interrupt his most important thing in life, which is being a good husband and father, which have not been easy. But like he's just a guy that to me I look at as someone who's at the top and hasn't had to give everything up to get there.
Cool.
And in fact would give up getting to the top in order to keep those things. So he's a guy that I just always am looking at what he's doing, the interviews he's doing. I just think he's solid in a world of a lot of fluff. He's a solid guy.
Nice, Mark.
I would say so. This maybe seems not cliche, but the filmmaker choosing the Academy Award winner. But I really am inspired by what films Chloe Zhao is putting out right now. I think they're bending or blurring the line between documentary and narrative. And yeah, it's something, these are films that you watch at. I'm like, this resonates with me. This is something I would want to create myself. So I'm really inspired by how she's able to, we talk about like kind of going into a world and showing that, and she does that, but then does it with a bit of narrative, with a couple scripted actors. And I think that's just such an exciting new frontier for filmmaking. And then well, you can, for if you really want to connect with me and Mike, you can do it once a month on theartofdocumentary.com. We do a Zoom call. It's
Doors aren't open.
The doors aren't open, but you can sign up. We reopen them in March, but you can actually, they will be able to interact with us at our summit on December 4th. We have some really exciting people part of that. People like Sam Davis, who's won an Academy Award for a documentary. We're having a variety of people on our panel that day. It's the AOD Summit. Our students get in for free for that, but we're making it available for purchase for people on the outside. So you can go find more information for that on Instagram, The Art of Documentary. AOD, that's us. And so, yeah, that's one way to connect. Or you can jump on my YouTube channel as well, just Mark Bone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Art of Documentary is the best.
I don't. Yeah, if you want. Yeah.
Love it.
Art of Documentary.
Well,
check
Mike,
it out.
And yeah, Mike, what's your phone number, Mike? We'll say that in the podcast right now too.
Well, guys, this was super fun. Thanks for joining us. Tons of great information, and honestly, very different than our typical interview. So I think it was cool for us to just get a deep dive into the artistic side of filmmaking and telling those meaningful stories, and just in general what you guys bring to the world. So thank you.
Such a good conversation. Thanks so much.
Amazing. Thank you for having us,
guys.